Hi, my name is Michael Ogia. I'm a TCK currently living in Istanbul, Turkey, and I work as a freelance editor for an English language newspaper here. Um, I really appreciate being able to be involved in the Change Schools Global TCK Summit, and I want to just give you a little bit of information before I jump into kind of some of the things that they wanted us to talk about. First of all, my TCK story. So, of course, like most TCKs, whenever I get asked, where are you from? It's always like, okay, where do I start? And usually, what I start and say is, well, if you want the full answer, my mom and dad were born in Egypt, but we're not Egyptian. I'm mostly Syrian, but I'm also part Iraqi and part Armenian. But my mom grew up in Lebanon. Before my mom and dad moved, or rather immigrated to the United States before they were married. They went on opposite coasts, actually. My mom immigrated to Los Angeles. My dad immigrated to New York. Eventually, they were put in touch by family friends, and they got married. And then they moved to Kentucky, which is where they had me. So I'm actually from Kentucky. I was born and raised in rural Kentucky, and I spent most of my life there. I actually spent 21 years there, it's where I went to university and did all my schooling. But I had the travel bug in me from a very young age, and by the time I finished my undergrad degree, I moved to Lebanon because I really wanted to get in touch with my roots there. I wanted to get in touch with my roots, meet my family, and I had this really burning desire to go. I wanted to go. I needed to go. Um, I studied sociology both at the undergraduate and the graduate level. And after I finished my degree, I went back to the United States for about 6 months to look for work. And then I eventually moved to India, where I lived for a year and a half, and now I'm living in Turkey, where I've lived for almost a year. And who knows where I'm going next? So it's been a wild ride so far. My mid 20s, rather, my 20s in general have been a lot of fun, but full of challenge and introspection, and a lot of the things that I think really help define the TCK experience that I'll get into in a bit. Um, a little bit more about kind of what I do regarding our, I guess you could say our TCK community, just the global TCK community. I am a co-host of TCK Chat, which is a biweekly a bi a biweekly, yeah, it's a biweekly event held on the first and third Wednesday. The first and third Wednesday of every month, where we meet on Twitter and using the hashtag TCK Chat, and we talk about a range of issues, some of which are a little bit more jovial, such as sports or love or family, or and then we also talk about some tougher issues like race and racism, gender, things like mental health and well-being, things like that. And so it's really a chance for TCKs to come together and meet and online, of course, like through a cyber medium, but still it's kind of a chance to connect to people that you really didn't necessarily even know were out there. And so it's a great way to come together. I recommend that you check it out. You can just Google TCK Chat and it should come right up. Now, why I'm speaking on this particular topic? Well, as I mentioned, when I was in, I went to grad school in Lebanon, and I studied sociology. But what I focused on was love and romantic relationship formation. In this specific instance, at least in terms of my graduate experience, it was among Arab youth, specifically Lebanese youth. But I also authored a blog, or founded and authored a blog called Loveanon for about 2 years and 4 months or so. It's still up. You can still check it out. I don't add any content anymore. It's kind of a chapter that I closed at the what I think was the right time to move to something new. And but it was still a huge part of my early 20s experience, and obviously of my graduate experience. And so it's something that I'm happy about and proud of, And whenever I get the chance to kind of combine some of my either previous or current interests, then I'm always happy to do that. So let's just dive right into some of the questions. And I don't know if they'll be necessarily down in the I don't know if the questions will be down in the information section of or the about section of the video, but if not, I'll kind of give you a little bit of a rundown as I do them. So the first one has to do with what being a TCK means to me. My fabulous co-host and very lovely co-host, Amanda Bate, she actually said it really well once. And it's really simple. She said that TCK, really being a third culture kid, it's not a label. It transcends the entire concept of a label. It's really an experience and a collection of experiences. And there's really so many different kinds of TCKs. I am definitely a very niche kind, meaning I'm not a missionary kid or a diplomat kid or an army kid type of thing. That's not my background at all. Yet I can still see completely eye to eye with other kinds of TCKs, which means that there must be something deeper to this experience in general. And I really think that being a TCK indicates that there's a profound sense of understanding and connectivity and kind of security with one another. That's not to say that it comes at the expense of excluding other people or excluding people that aren't TCKs or aren't global citizens or haven't moved around, etc. But I think that there is something about it that's like, yeah, there's just a certain part of myself that I don't need to explain, that you just get, that you just understand. Now, I think that's really significant for the second question that they wanted us to answer, which is kind of, what are the behaviors and attitudes that impact our relationships? And by the way, if I'm looking down, it's because I made notes, so just bear with me. But what are these attitudes of behavior that affect relationships within TCKs? There's a lot of things that have been said, whether it's, we're easily adaptable, or, it's easy for us to pick up and move somewhere else, or, we have no trouble reaching across culture. But, what I really wanted to focus on, even though it was about family and work and love, I really wanted to focus on the love part, because I think it's both indicative of our TCK experience or being TCKs, but also to wider millennials as a whole. And I've written about this, that I think there's a profound fear of intimacy that unfortunately I think the TCK experience could exacerbate. Now, I'm sure that there's people that would disagree and say no, it makes it easier to foster intimacy. But I think, especially in my own experience, intimacy is something that is often very feared. It's hard to really sustain. Why would you want to have something like a close connection when you know it's going to go away, when you're going to go away? It can be really detrimental, especially to long-term relationships. And so the next question that they wanted us to talk about was about how age affects this. I don't know if you really grow out of it. I think I think as you get older, your priorities change. I know mine do. I think as we age, our priorities all change, especially as, when you consider what you valued in your early 20s or your late teens, are you really valuing those anymore? Are those still really kind of defining who you are, what you want, where you're going? Ultimately, if going back to this concept of fearing intimacy or fearing closeness, I think it's really, I'd like to think that as we get older, at least I hope that as I get older, a certain sense of commitment won't necessarily be a destabilizing force in our personal or especially romantic lives, because it's really something that I know I've struggled with. The fact is that and to be perfectly frank, I'm tired of breaking hearts. I mean, I think it's something that we can do quite easily, because our sense of belonging doesn't belong to a place necessarily. And that has implications that I'm still exploring. So, this actually kind of ties into the fourth question as well, about kind of, what are the challenges of families that raise TCKs? And I'll say that I never even knew that I was a TCK, or at least I never really introduced this concept until about 2010, when a good friend of mine was telling me about this, and he was really a mentor. He was about 20 years older than me, and he was a good mentor, someone like an older brother that I looked up to. And he was like, Michael, you should really check out this concept called TCK because I think you reflect it. And the fact is, his kids were American, but growing up in Lebanon. And, he said that, yeah, these are things that are really impacting who they are, meaning growing up across cultures, not really able to really fit in either place, but yet at the same time, we are fitting in. And so I think I think it's really important. And of course, thinking about how I'll raise my own kids one day, obviously, hopefully with someone else. Um, but the idea is that, thinking about that, I think communication is incredibly important. I think having this framework of what a TCK is and what it means, I think going into parenthood would make it so much easier because I've been struggling with this for years, regardless of whether I knew the concept or not. But now that I have a framework, it's a lot easier to understand, oh yeah, and not just a framework, but it is a community. It is an understanding that, yeah, there are other people out there that feel and think and experience so many things that I do, and, might be afraid of commitment, whether it's to a person, to a place, or to an ideology, or a concept, or whatever, and that's okay, because it's about getting through it, and it's about getting through it through introspection, and through communication and reflection and sharing. And I think the more that we understand that, okay, we're not isolated or alienated or really alone in this giant world that we want to just massively explore. I mean, like, I think that really will make a big difference when it comes to our own children, our generation, meaning, I'm 26, I'll be 27 in August. Whenever our generation is having kids, we're already having kids, some of us, you know, helping them to understand who they are at a very early age and help them grow into that, I think will be incredibly beneficial for them and for us, because obviously we'll be able to learn a lot from them. So, how do we find support? That's the last question, and I think it's a great question because it's difficult. There are some dedicated, people and places out there, like, like I mentioned, Amanda Bate. She works a lot with TCKs. There's really one of the biggest suggestions that I have, and forgive me if this is a bit self-serving, but it's a community like TCK Chat, because just knowing that you're not alone really helps, and knowing that, okay, they had that experience too, even though they're a black person who grew up, or an African that grew up in, Nigeria, but is part Kenyan, but then spent a lot of their time in France, and then moved to Cuba. Like, even if they had that kind of crazy, seemingly different experience, it's amazing how intimate that can be when you realize, well, actually, our experiences aren't that different, because they still seem to foster a lot of the same emotions and feelings. And that in itself, I think, can be a very kind of soothing, or I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess it can be an easier way to get over some of these deeper, boundaries, or hindrances, rather, that we might have to fostering long-term intimacy, which is ultimately what family, work, and love all have in common in many ways. It's ability to sustain long-term bonds that then really, I guess, drive us into success and happiness and personal fulfillment, apart from other things. So how do we find support? Again, look at each other, use resources that are available, like the internet. Teo Roxon's magazine, Use Your Difference, is geared towards both millennials and TCKs, but it's fantastic. I definitely recommend you check it out. He puts so much time and effort and money and resources into this, and it's there. Check out something like TCK Chat. Google it, do what you want, but I really, really recommend that. And I recommend everyone to, and especially myself, but I really say this to myself as well, to not fear being close to someone, because you're, afraid of what's going to happen, of what's going to of what might happen, or of the fact that maybe they won't be able to come with you. You know, it's difficult, and I'm sure that we've all, you know, if you're watching this, I'm sure in many ways that you can relate, whether it's romantically or not. So on that note, I really want to appreciate. I really want to say thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you tuning into hearing what I have to say. Please feel free to message me if you you know, want to talk about what anything that I said. If you agreed with me, if you disagree with me. I think in many ways, we need to start talking about more uncomfortable things. Us as a society, as a species, we need to transcend our discomfort with talking about whatever it may be, because ultimately that's how creative change, constructive change really happens, and that's how we can get over things. So let's talk. Thank you, Salonia, Grace, Sid, Josie, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you to Amanda and Ellen at Sea Change Mentoring for introducing me to TCK Chat, Teo as well. And you know, my Twitter handle is @MikeOgia. It's down in the description. I really hope to hear from you all and to communicate with you more about this, and hope to see you at TCK Chat. Thanks.